Hello, everybody. Jax West from Justice with Jax, Stephen Avery Project, and MAM Gossip over on Facebook. We are live today to talk about the Marni Yang case. I have just put two links in the chat. First one is to the freemarniyang.com website. And then the second one is to the filing. I should move my microphone over here. Haha. The second one is to the filing that I'm going to read today. So if anybody wants to go to the freemarniyang.com website and go to case files, that's where this is that we'll be reading today. Hello, Kathy. So, and hello, Ashley. The Marni Yang case is a case here in Illinois, in Lake County, Illinois, that hasn't gotten, since most of the people who follow here are from the Stephen Avery case. Well, this hasn't gotten the Netflix treatment that, that there's this great documentary about the case that really educates you on what's going on there. There's been a couple of shows that have covered the case, but it has not told you the real story. So there is nothing that you can find in Googling or searching on YouTube on the Marni Yang case that is going to give you the actual facts. So you need to stay tuned to the website, the freemarniyang.com. There's also a Facebook page Dad runs. That's where you can find real information about this case. And where it's at currently is like all wrongful convictions, trying to get back into court because the legal team has found so much to show innocence. And so I thought it would be good to try and get people new to the case or those who have followed the case if we read the most recent filing by her attorney, Judd Stone, that will, give you a little insight into this case. And if anybody has any questions along the way, post it here in the chat. Or if you are not watching live and you watch it later, I've got the justicewithjax@gmail.com. So you can shoot me an email there if you have any questions, or you can go to the freemarniyang.com website or the Facebook pages. So, and as I said, I posted the link for the website and the case files. So if you want to read this yourself or you want to follow along with me as I read it, and just like when I read all the other filings for the other cases, sadly, the way our system works is in order to get anything into court, there has to be some precedence. You have to show another case that such and such, something like this happened. So other cases will be cited and talking about the legalese, that kind of stuff. I skip that. I'm not reading that or going into it. But that's where if you want to have all of that, go to the freemarniyang.com and go into the case files. There are other things that are listed on that website in the case files. So go ahead and do your deep dive and look into this case. Marni's case, like so many other of our wrongful convictions, it lives and breathes on a false confession. And in Marni's case, What some people will stand on is, well, she didn't make this false confession while she was in the tiny room at the police station where they're using the Reed technique and all their, tips and tricks in beating you down in that room for, X amount of hours there that gets you to finally confess. And Marni is also, not Brendan Dassey, who people see with the low IQ. And just so many people are like, you're never going to be able to get me to say I did something that I didn't do. This goes into why Marni Yang would confess to a crime she didn't commit. There's a lot to it, but going over this filing that her attorney did, it is dated November 30th of 2022. We'll delve into that. And as I said, people can ask me questions too, as we go through. But let's read the filing because it covers a lot of the bases. And then you can also go to freemarniying.com and get even more. We've got tons of tabs on there for things for you to look into. So this is Marni Yang's response to the state's motions to dismiss her post-conviction petition alleging actual innocence. And this is 77 pages. Now comes the defendant, Marni Yang, by her attorney, Jed Stone, and responds to the state's motions to dismiss her post-conviction petition. In support thereof, Marni Yang states as follows. 1. On October 1, 2019, Marni Yang filed her post-conviction motion advancing her claims of actual innocence. On December 15, 2021, she filed her amended post-conviction petition persisting in her claims of actual innocence. On May 17, 2021, Ms. Yang filed an additional document entitled Compelling New Forensic Evidence Advances Marni Yang's Post-Conviction Petition for Actual Innocence. These three filings form the core of Ms. Yang's post-conviction pleadings. The state filed its motion to dismiss Ms. Yang's post-conviction petition on February 26, 2020, and its supplemental motion to dismiss her amended post-conviction petition on May 31, 2022. This response is offered to answer both of the state's motions to dismiss. Over the passage of time between the initial filing of Ms. Yang's claims of actual innocence and today's filing, November 30, 2022, Ms. Yang's counsel and the state have engaged in complex and thoughtful discussions in an effort to advance some of Ms. Yang's claims of innocence. On August 25, 2022, in a written correspondence to defense counsel, the state agreed to withdraw its arguments in their motion to dismiss with respect to the following claims, allowing them to proceed to a stage 3 hearing. A, the claims of innocence regarding DNA on the shell casings found at the crime scene. B, the claims of innocence regarding DNA or lack thereof on the bracelet found on or about March 1, 2009 by police investigators. C, the claims of Jesse Delgado supported by a notarized and sworn affidavit. And D, the claims of Stephen Wade supported by a notarized and sworn affidavit. The response to the state's remaining issues in Ms. Yang's petition shall focus on A, the claims of Emily Yang regarding the use of suborned perjury by the prosecution, the claims of John Larson, Arthur Borchers, and Cyril Wecht, MD, which, if you're a true crime supporter, you'll know that name, Cyril Wecht, contained in the May 17, 2021 pleadings and exhibits. C, advancing evidence of an alternate suspect of the killer of Ronnie Ryder. D, the unreliability of the Yang Passion tape recordings. E, the state's withholding from the jury additional evidence of the unreliability of the Yang Passion tape recordings. F, evidence that Assistant State's Attorney Patricia Fix concealed exculpatory evidence from the defense. And G. The use of false evidence to the grand jury by ASA Fix, which created a false alibi for Sean Gale. Let me pause here to explain to those of you who either are not here from Illinois or the Chicagoland area or not football fans. Sean Gale. Who is Sean Gale? Sean Gale was part of the Super Bowl 1985-86 Chicago Bears, which was a big deal in our country at that time, that the Chicago Bears, I believe they were undefeated. I mean, it was such a good season for them and going all the way to the Super Bowl. They did that video, the Super Bowl shuffle, all of that. Sean Gale is a member of that Bears team. So here in Illinois, any player who was part of that team are like gods. So that is who Sean Gale is. So those of you, because I know we also have followers not from this country, even though Sean Gale no longer lives in this country, that's who Sean Gale is and why it is a big deal and why Marni Yang's case is so newsworthy, because he's a pretty big celebrity. Next section is the guiding principles of law for this case. Where Ms. Yang has made a substantial showing of evidence, this cause should be advanced to a stage 3 evidentiary hearing. At a stage 2 proceeding, the court, quote, is not to engage in fact-finding or credibility determinations. The Post-Conviction Act contemplates that fact-finding and credibility questions are to be resolved at the evidentiary stage hearing, unquote. And now going into court stuff that we're not reading. Another one of court stuff. Okay, so the affidavits of Arthur Borchers, Dr. Cyril Wecht, Emily Yang, Jesse Delgado, Andrew Yang, and Stephen Wade supporting the claims in Ms. Yang's petition are sufficient to advance her claims to a stage 3 hearing. Next section is titled Prosecutorial Misconduct. The Supreme Court of the United States held that deliberate deception of a court and jury by presentation of known false evidence is, quote, incompatible with rudimentary demands of justice, unquote. Marni Yang has alleged sufficient evidence to show that Assistant State's Attorney Fix allowed, and what a name too, to have the name Fix, allowed false testimony before the grand jury. The false testimony misled the grand jury to provide Sean Gale with a false alibi. Marni Yang has alleged sufficient evidence to show Assistant State's Attorney Fix suborned perjury when she compelled Emily Yang, Emily is Marni's daughter, when she compelled Emily Yang to provide false testimony at Marni Yang's trial. At the Illinois Supreme Court, blah, 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 talking about other thing. The alleged misconduct by State's Attorney Fix is sufficient to entitle Ms. Yang to an evidentiary hearing on those issues. Next section is titled The Post-Trial Discovery of the Undeveloped 35mm film that contained crime scene evidence that, when developed and analyzed by post-conviction defense experts, is newly discovered, non-cumulative evidence of actual innocence. The failure of the state to disclose evidence that may affect the jury's determination of guilt or innocence will render the fact-finding of the jury unreliable and require a new trial, irrespective of the good faith or bad faith of the prosecution. Even if the evidence trial counsel did not request favorable evidence, the prosecution had an obligation to disclose such evidence to the defendant under the 5th and 14th Amendments of the United States Constitution and the parallel provisions of the Illinois Constitution. Brady. Hello, Maz. In the prosecution of Marni Yang, the crime scene investigators took photographs of the scene with both digital camera and 35mm film cameras, contemporaneous with the crime itself. The 35 millimeter photos were not developed until years after the trial, when post-conviction expert Arthur Borchers found a mention of 35 millimeter film in an obscure note on a page within thousands of pages of police reports. The development of the canisters of 35 millimeter film uncovered theretofore unknown information about the location of bullet holes at the crime scene. And then at the end of this will be Borcher's affidavit. That's important to point out, Kathy, again, for those who are not from the area, that this assistant DA at the time is now a judge in Lake County. And Lake County is also the same place. And a lot of these cast of characters, if you will, are the same people involved in the Melissa Kaluzinski wrongful conviction. It's also another Lake County case. And Lake County is like the number one place for wrongful convictions in the United States. It's horrible, Lake County. Bearing a reference to canisters of undeveloped photographs of the scene is not the same disclosure of exculpatory evidence. Due process requires the state to disclose to a defendant any material or information within its possession or control that tends to negate the guilt of the defendant. See Brady. So we all know this is a Brady violation. Here, the now developed 35 millimeter photographs taken by police investigators allowed Art Borchers and John Larson to track bullet trajectories with scientific accuracy. These film canisters were under the exclusive control of the state and in the actual possession of the Deerfield police. This film was not tendered to defense counsel before trial. And let me talk about for a second the bullet trajectories. And we'll get into this more, but it's more is included in this filing. But those of you who know that I used to be part of this case several years ago and then was gone for a bit, and now I've been back for a few months. But so years ago, I had attended a roundtable with the Yang legal team. And so these men that are mentioned in here, the experts, you know, so every expert was like reporting on their area of expertise. And for me, who I knew of the case when it had happened, because you can't be from this area and not have heard about Sean Gale's girlfriend being murdered. But I didn't know any real details of it, and I don't know Marni at that time had no personal connection, so I'm just going off of science and facts and watching these people present the actual evidence. And this was the number one thing that shows me that Marni Yang is innocent, because there is just no way possible with the trajectory of these bullets for Marni Yang to have committed this crime. And they'll talk about it in here. And I even thought about going, I should do some measurements and stuff and show you. But we'll be doing more videos and such on this case because, more and more people have to know about this case and the actual facts of it. And something I should have my husband print out a copy for me too, so it would be easy for me to show you. But I can show you the picture of me and Marni. Okay, so there's a picture of me and Marni, and I think I made that the cover picture for this event. I'm 5'7", and Marni is lucky if she's 5 feet. I think she's closer to 4'9". All right. The victim was 5'9", so 2 inches taller than me. And where the initial bullet goes in and exits the victim, there is no possible way that Marnie would be able to shoot me like that. And I'm 2 inches shorter than the victim. There's just, I mean, she's a wee little thing. It's not possible. And I also, in the picture that I'm saying that I should have my husband print for me so I would easily have it. Marnie's kids had an event that I went to years ago where they were talking about this case. And so Marnie's daughter Emily, who is cited in here, and we'll hear from Emily. I believe she's even an inch taller than Marnie. And so I had a picture taken where I had her hold her hands out. Hey, sexy girlfriend. I had her hold her hands out like a gun and point at me, and she can't shoot me where the victim was shot and the trajectory. The trajectory is such a big deal. Hello, Steve. Um, and and that's where I go. It's science. I don't want to hear about her false confession because people say shit that's not true. You can't get past the science and the facts, and that alone, the trajectory of the first shot into the victim, there's no way this 4'9" little bitty thing could have done this to this 5'9" woman. And there's plenty of other things too. But that was just the number one thing for me when I sat in on that meeting. Steve Lapino was at that meeting. Um, but that, and they had this makeshift body where they have the holes in the, they had the wooden pointer stick going through. It's just that alone, just saying that alone, I knew this woman did not do it. And the stuff that her legal team, all the experts on this case, where if you go to freemarniyang.com, we've got an experts page where you can see who these experts are. And then we've got the evidence page where you can look into more evidence. There's just so much. And what I've told people over the years too, it's like, tell me why you think she's guilty. Tell me what it is that you think proves her guilt, and I'll be able to tell you why that's not. And it's not because of just how I feel on something. The science and facts just point to it. And those of you who have followed me over the years, I'm no bullshit. If I was to uncover something that told me that Marnie was guilty, I would say that. I would say if Stephen Avery was guilty. I would say if Melissa Kalyazinski was guilty, because there's nothing in it for me. It doesn't change my life one way or another if these people are guilty or innocent. I would call them out on it. I'm going by science and facts, and everything shows that Marni Yang is innocent. So please don't just listen to, you hear that there's this false confession, that there's this confession that she made and that it was recorded, that means she did it, because the science doesn't add up to it. And even the things that Marnie says in that supposedly secret call don't add up to the science and facts of what actually happened. But all right, let me get back to where I was in this, and we're on page 5 of 77 right now. But so where we left off before I went down that way is there's pictures that were taken of the crime scene that weren't turned over to the defense. Wrong. The developed photographs are material if they create a, quote, probability that had the evidence been disclosed at trial, the result of the proceedings may have been different, unquote. And then talking about another case. And then it says, by burying the existence of the 35 millimeter film canisters, the reliability of the verdict is undermined and the court's findings rendered unworthy of confidence. And this is something we just discussed when I did the live the other day on the latest Stephen Avery filing. I hate that this is something that they want you to try and say and prove that had they known this, the jury would have done that. You don't know. Nobody knows what a jury would have done had they known this. So that's why it has to get back into court and you need a new hearing, a new trial, whatever. So I don't like it when a judge will say, "Oh, even if the judge had seen these pictures from this 35 millimeter film, it wouldn't have changed anything." You don't know that. You're not the jury. So when you have that the state had evidence, they're supposed to give all evidence to the defense. The state has evidence that they did not give to the defense. Come on, new trial. Not, oh, I don't think it would have changed the jury's mind. You don't know. So let's go back to court. At stage two, the board jurors, Larson, Wecht evidence need not convince this court their analysis of the evidence exonerates Ms. Yang. The Illinois Supreme Court instructs that, quote, new evidence supporting an actual innocence claim need not be entirely, a word that's hard for me to pronounce, dispositive, I guess, to be likely to alter the results on retrial, unquote. Borchers, Larson, and Wecht, through their analysis, demonstrate to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty Ms. Yang could not have been the shooter. Their analysis was only possible by developing the theretofore undeveloped 35 millimeter film. Maz, I read the book a few years ago. Yeah, I know, Maz. Our system is so horrible, and you've been around long enough following wrongful convictions that even though you're not from our country, you probably know more about the problems here than uh, people living here do. This evidence must be advanced to a stage 3 hearing. Our second district appellate court reminds us, quote, discovery is not a game of hide and seek, unquote. The people claim that Borchers, Larson, Wecht evidence is not newly discovered because of an obscure reference in 15,000 pages of written discovery alerted the defense of its existence. This claim is trickery, not due process. Another thing, I don't like the bullshit. I don't like it. State you have that evidence, you give it to the defense. Everybody is supposed to be caring about justice for the victim, justice for Ronnie Ryder. So it shouldn't matter if there is evidence that maybe doesn't look good on who you're trying to say did this crime, because the end result of the state is they're supposed to be wanting to get the actual person who did this, not making the evidence fit their narrative. So I don't care that they had something listed in somewhere of 15,000 thing that said those canisters. You didn't give those canisters over to the defense, and you should have. They shouldn't have to see a line of it and ask for it. You didn't give it to them. You hid it. Ms. Yang is fortunate that investigators she engaged in her claims of innocence found references to undeveloped 35 millimeter photographs. She is fortunate that these investigators not only found the film canisters, but also developed and analyzed the photographs. All you who follow true crime, you know how much gobbledygook there is in legal documents and how trying to decipher this stuff. So yeah, I don't want to hear about you should have known. You should have given over the film. Next section's titled The State's Reliance on the So-Called Confession, the Passion Tapes, is ill-conceived. Should the people rely on this tape recorded evidence, the defense must be permitted to introduce evidence of its unreliability. See report of David Thompson, which is Exhibit 2 later. The Passion Tape is a classic false confession. See report of David Thompson. Marni Yang knew that Christy Passion was wearing a wire before she sat down with her at Denny's restaurant. Passion told her police handlers the wire had been discovered before the Yang Passion conversation took place. This is something back when I would visit Melissa. Well, I would visit Melissa and Marni on the same day. When I would talk with Marni, when I would visit her, and she says it matter of factly. She saw the wire. And there's more leading up to it on why you would think that Christy could be compromised and wearing a wire. And we'll get into that. So it's not a true confession when you know she's wired and you're saying things for the benefit of the people you know who are listening and the reasons why she would do that. Let's keep going. I'm going to try and not get completely off track constantly, but you know me, that's hard. Um All right. In fact, days before the Yang Passion Denny's recorded statement, Ms. Yang had told both of her parents that she believed the police would secure a warrant to arrest her 16-year-old son, charging him with the Ryder murder. And see the affidavits of Marni's parents. So, and something to know about Marni's parents is these are two completely different phone calls. Her parents were divorced, so they're not together. And she told them on so each parent on separate things, I'm just going to make shit up. And law enforcement was listening on all of Marni's phone calls. So they know that this call occurred with both of her parents, where she said she was going to make shit up prior to meeting with Christy Passion at Denny's. All right. Ms. Yang told her parents she would make shit up, falsely confessing to the murder. She falsely believed this would derail the arrest of her son. She would be arrested. Her lawyers would take care of it in court. Which, prior to me seeing Making a Murderer, that's what I always thought. I'm not going to ask for a lawyer. I didn't do this. And, so therefore there's no evidence I did this. So I'm just going to, explain to them and talk to them real quick, and then they're going to let me go. So she's thinking along those lines of, well, I didn't do it. There's no evidence I did it. They're going after my son to try and say my son did it. I know my son didn't do it because, they were together or at the same location. They're harassing my son. So I'm going to make shit up. I'm going to say I did it and I didn't do it. They'll stop harassing my 16-year-old child. And the lawyer, I didn't do it. And, innocent people don't go to prison, right? So the lawyer will take care of it. That's what she thought. She thought she was doing the only thing she could do at that time to stop the harassment of her children. To further assist the court in resolving the state's motion to dismiss and allowing this cause to proceed to a stage 3 hearing, appended to this response are affidavits from Emily Yang, Arthur Borchers, Cyril Wecht, MD, Jesse Delgado, Andrew Yang, and Stephen Wade as exhibits in support of her claims of actual innocence. Wherefore, Marni Yang prays this court deny the state's motion to dismiss and set this cause for a date certain for her stage 3 hearing. And okay, this is talking about another case. So let me lot to skip in this other case. I really hate that you have to show another case like that, like similar, to do anything. I don't get it. Okay. This is David Thompson, a certified forensic interviewer, was contacted by the post-conviction team of Marni Yang with the request to offer an analysis in the case of People of the State of Illinois versus Marni Yang. The scope of my analysis and consultation is to evaluate information obtained through an alleged confession of Marni Yang that was subsequently utilized in her conviction. This confession was not directly obtained by law enforcement, but rather through a recorded conversation that Ms. Yang had with her friend Christy Passion. It is the specific information obtained through this conversation that is the basis of this report to analyze the reliability of this confession as it relates to known causes of false confessions. Upon my engagement of this service, I was provided with evidentiary support that was included in the original case against Ms. Yang, as well as expert opinions that have come forward after Ms. Yang's conviction. As part of the analysis, I reviewed these expert opinions, affidavits, and recordings, both audio and video, that were provided, including 2 audio files of Ms. Yang's recorded conversation with Ms. Passion, 2 different Denny's tapes, 3 phone call recordings, one of which is making shit up, 80 videos of Marni in custody. As this report will detail, the context of the above recordings is essential in attempting to understand the entire perspective of each, as well as their relative importance. The timeline of evidence obtained, interviews with witnesses and other subjects relative to Ms. Yang, and the ultimate result of a confession will be discussed in this report. This report will be broken down into multiple parts for ease of reference and contextual understanding of the causes of false and involuntary confessions as they relate to Ms. Yang. The outline of the report will be as follows: summary of findings, David Thompson, CFI background and qualifications, which we'll skip, false confessions, causes and risks of improper techniques, and analysis of Ms. Yang's confession. I'm only going to read the things that are specific to Marni because we're going to be on here all day. But stuff is available on, like I said, the free marniying.com website where you can read all this in its entirety. So part 1, summary of findings. It is of high likelihood that the misclassification error, consisting of unreliable forensic analysis as well as confirmation bias, led to Ms. Yang's identification as the primary suspect in this case. The dismissal of inconsistent and conflicting evidence combined with the avoidance of alternative theories demonstrate how misclassification contributed to Ms. Yang's role as the primary suspect. The lack of any parental or legal representation in the interviews of Emily and Andrew Yang, both juveniles at the time. Andrew and Emily are twins, they were 16. Allowed for potentially inappropriate tactics to be used in these interviews, including the false evidence ploy, explicit threats, and promises. It is of high probability that these tactics were used and are known to increase the likelihood of false confessions, especially with vulnerable suspects or subjects. Although neither Emily nor Andrew confessed to this crime, the context of their involvement in treatment by law enforcement has a direct correlation to Ms. Yang's recorded statements. While in police custody, Ms. Yang was interrogated using several of the tactics that have been proven to increase the likelihood of false confessions, specifically one of coerced compliance. Over a lengthy interrogation lasting multiple days, Ms. Yang was subjected to explicit threats and promises and false evidence ploy and confrontational tactics. In addition to the psychologically coercive tactics deployed on Ms. Yang, she was also impacted by these same strategies being utilized on her juvenile children and her friend Christy Passion. And see, you don't have to be a juvenile. You don't have to be of low IQ for this to be effective in getting you to say what law enforcement wants you to say. You're no match for their training. At the time of Ms. Yang's recorded confession, she is cognizant of the investigator's ability to coerce her children and those around her to provide potentially false information. Investigators pulling Andrew Yang out of school, as well as including him in a photo lineup, demonstrated their intent on classifying him as a suspect. And sadly, this would still be able to happen here in Illinois. While Illinois has passed something to protect juveniles, they could not get it to the age 18 and younger. It's 14 and younger. So they were 16 at this time. So they still would have been caught up like this. That police could go and take your children out of school without your knowledge or consent and question your children. That's And I don't think this is something that should even just be for juveniles. I think, period, nobody, no matter your age, your IQ, anything, they should not be able to take you in a room and question you without legal representation. And that is to protect everybody because not everybody is wrongfully accused. There's plenty of bad people out there. So our law enforcement needs to be protected too from what they could possibly say that law enforcement did. So it's to help everybody to just have a lawyer in that room when you question anybody. Um, okay, next page. It is of high likelihood, according to both Ms. Yang's statements as well as the audio recordings of Christy Passion, that Ms. Yang was aware she was being recorded while providing her statements. This knowledge of the recording device is important as it demonstrates Ms. Yang's intent, as she states, to make shit up. Ms. Yang's confession was intended to appease investigators and protect her family. Miss Yang knew that her conversation was being directly relayed to investigators. Ms. Yang's state of mind as she provided her confession was defined in the conversation she had with her parents and specific remarks she made to her father, Larry Morar. This recorded conversation was not provided to be able to be reviewed in its entirety. However, statements made by both Mr. Morar and Ms. Yang indicate that she discussed making shit up and, quote, letting the lawyers figure it out, unquote, in order to appease the investigators and protect her family. So this isn't a defense tactic that she is using. She said this before she met with Chrissy. I'm going to make this up. I'm just going to make shit up and they'll stop harassing my children. And so then when she goes and meets with Christy Passion, who she knows Christy also had talked to law enforcement prior to this, she sees a wire. So here it is. I'm going to make shit up. Miss Yang was knowledgeable about the crime scene and supporting details of the incident due to contamination in all three capacities: unintentional, intentional, and through a third party. Ms. Yang was provided specific details of the crime scene by investigators while in custody, as well as shown crime scene photos. Additionally, the murder of Ronnie Ryder was well publicized in the media, and many details of the incident would have been common knowledge, especially at the time of Ms. Yang's confession, approximately 18 months after the homicide occurred. Now, remember, I told you, Sean Gale is a god here in Illinois. This was all over the news. 18 months, a year and a half later, all this time. So you've seen tons of stuff on news. And of course, now I can't speak for Marni on this. I'm speaking if it was me this happened to. And Sean Gale was somebody that I had a romantic relationship with. And Marni not only had a sexual relationship with Sean Gale, he was a business partner of hers. So hearing about this case, I absolutely would look into it. and go, "Oh, what happened here?" So things. And then when you're being interrogated, those of you from the Stephen Avery case, think of Brendan Dassey when he's sitting there with Michael O'Kelly and he's got all those pictures on the table in front of Brendan. They do that intentionally to try and get the response out of you what they want. So you're seeing all these crime scene photos and stuff because they want to upset you. And so and Marnie is no idiot. So you can put things together from what you've seen on the news, from what they've got laid out on the table, from what they've from interrogating her children, from interrogating Christy Passion. You're all going to talk on what they said. And so she's able to make shit up to say that she did it. But again, the stuff that she said doesn't match what happened, what the science shows. And it's 18 months. 18 months harassment. Miss Yang's recorded confession contained details of the crime that were either provided to her while in custody or through other witnesses. Just see, this is why I really shouldn't skip ahead because it's all in here. um, Other witnesses interviewed by the task force, including Emily Yang, Andrew Yang. Andrew is Emily's twin brother, so they're the oldest that were 16, and then Brandon Yang, he's the youngest. I want to say, was he? I can't remember how old he was at the time. Maybe Kathy or Steve recall, but uh, Brandon's the younger one. Sal, how do you say his name? Devera. He had dated Marnie at one point, and Christy Passion. Miss Yang's recorded confession also contained details of the crime that were inconsistent and conflicting with the crime scene and other forensic evidence. These inconsistent details should have been considered when evaluating the reliability of the confession. But they don't care. They just want to be able to say, we solved this high profile case for our god, Sean Gale here, because we're not going to look at Sean Gale, even though it's his baby mama that died. We just, we want to get a check. This is solved and it's on this person. Ms. Yang's, did I read that one already? Yes, I read that one. It is of high probability that Ms. Yang provided a coerced, compliant confession, derivative of misclassification, incited through coercive techniques, including threats and promises, lengthy interrogations, and the pursuit of investigators using confrontational tactics on her family and friends. Ms. Yang then provided a contaminated, inaccurate, and unreliable confession, knowing she was being recorded and has otherwise maintained her innocence, consistent with a coerced, compliant confession. And then the next section here, it's really long. This is Dave Thompson's qualifications and background. And that is one of the things to know about the Marni Yang team here. I mean, these are some top-notch experts, so this isn't a family friend or anything like that. These are people that this is what they do for a living. And so go to freemarniyang.com and you can read this big, long thing of his background. And I mean, I'm still scrolling. The next section, part 3, false confessions, causes and risks of improper techniques. We're not going to read through that either. It's something that you can read yourself, and a lot of us already know all about the things they do to get people to falsely confess. Part 4, analysis of Ms. Yang's confession. Overview. The summary of my findings are highlighted within part 1 of this report, as this section is intended to provide contextual information supporting those opinions. The analysis is based off the information provided me at the time of this report, and I reserve the right to edit or change my opinion as additional evidence or information is obtained. Let me just say there, I've talked about this before. I'm a proud flip flopper. And this is what our law enforcement and our whole legal system should be on. It's if new evidence comes forward to show that your prior theory is not correct, you absolutely should flip flop and go, wow, this was wrong. This is the facts here. So I like that he puts in here, according to the evidence that exists right now, these are the findings. And things could change if other evidence were to come forward, like more evidence that the state hides and then you're able to find years later while somebody rots away for something they didn't do. All right, next section, contextual overview. Ms. Yang's confession is of unique circumstance, as she does not volunteer any admissions while in custody with law enforcement, but rather discloses information in a public setting while being discreetly audio recorded. To analyze this confession, the context of what led to this moment where the confession occurs is essential in measuring the reliability and voluntariness of Ms. Yang's statements. This context serves as a guideline for the path of Ms. Yang's interaction with law enforcement, which also includes the impact of these engagements with her children and friends. These instances of interviews, interrogations, and contact by law enforcement all have potential to contribute to any coerciveness, contamination, and the overall state of mind of Ms. Yang upon her decision to confess to this crime. In addition to contamination, the voluntariness of the confession must be measured against any promises or threats made throughout the investigation that may potentially incentivize a confession regardless of its validity. Next section says Andrew Yang, son of Marni Yang, 16 years old at the time of questioning, January 2009. Andrew Yang had multiple interactions with law enforcement regarding this issue, one of which was during an execution of a search warrant of Miss Yang's residence. During this interaction, A. Yang states that he was separated from his siblings and feared that he was being arrested, prompting him to ask for an attorney. An additional interaction included an incident when Andrew, I'm just going to say Andrew, even though it says A. Yang. I think it's easier for people to follow along if I say his name. Andrew recalls that two law enforcement officers had been asking fellow students if they knew him, showing his picture. Andrew states that he was then approached by these officers and taken for a ride in their vehicle to clear up some questions. The investigative process would lead a reasonable person to assume that Andrew was a person of interest in this crime. Can you imagine that? If police officers come to your high school showing your picture in connection to a murder, high school is a tough time. And I can't imagine. An additional interaction included an incident when Andrew recalls that two law enforcement officers had been asking fellow students if they knew him. Oh, I said that already. I really should move my mouse to where my cursor to where I am. Andrew Yang also described his interaction with George Falenko, also involved in the Melissa Kalyazinski case, stating that during the interrogations, Falenko was frustrated and yelled, telling Andrew that, quote, one of you is going to prison for the rest of your life, unquote. Falenko's a piece of shit. Andrew was placed into a photo lineup, 16 years old, in a photo lineup in late 2007 and shown to potential witnesses of this crime. In addition to this, friends of Andrew, including Jesse Delgado and Rodolfo Betancourt, were also interviewed by law enforcement. These interactions would indicate that Andrew was considered a suspect in this crime, which is an element to Marni Yang's state of mind when deciding to give a confession. They're going to his friends. Andrew states that he became suicidal and was treated in a mental health institution due to these experiences. He claims that he was broken down mentally, and that law enforcement, quote, got me believing my truth was a lie, unquote. Remember, Brendan? They got to my head. Andrew also stated that he, quote, just going to agree with their version of the truth because I have no other option, unquote. Melissa Kaluzinski, just tell us it was an accident and you'll go home. Emily Yang, daughter of Marni Yang, 16 years old at the time of questioning, January 2009. Emily's interaction with law enforcement initiated during an execution of a search warrant at Ms. Yang's residence. In her affidavit, Emily stated that she was placed into a patrol car and brought to the Round Lake Beach Police Department for approximately 12 hours. No parent. During this time, Emily claimed that she felt she was being pushed psychologically and intimidated. Emily states that during this interrogation, her requests to call her mother were denied. She further explains that the officers, quote, yelled at her and told her she was lying, unquote, and that, quote, I was telling them the truth, but they refused to accept it, unquote. Emily also stated that law enforcement promised her that they would get her in contact with her father. Sorry, see, that's one of the things that now it's making me tear up. That she hadn't seen in several years. According to Emily, in exchange for this contact, she was to provide law enforcement a statement. She states that she had to rewrite the statement several times, detailing false information under direction from the law enforcement officers. Emily stated that the law enforcement officers told her that they had talked to her father and that he missed her or missed the family. According to Emily, when she was put in contact with her father, he was upset that she reached out to him, contradictory to the statements made by the law enforcement officers. So think about that. Emily's parents got divorced when she was young, and her father abandoned the family. So little kids don't understand what's going on, and they want both their parents. So even though she has had no contact with her dad, hearing now that her dad misses her and loves her, and this is how she can talk to her dad. So, okay, I'm going to tell you whatever you want so I can talk to my dad. And then when she talks to him, he has no clue what she's talking about. And I don't know if it's in this filing anywhere, but he was brutal to this young 16-year-old girl in what he said to her, swearing at her and telling her never to talk to him again. But that's the lengths that this Lake County Major Crimes Task Force would go to make this evidence fit their narrative, to make the 16-year-old girl lie about her mom so she could talk to her dad who didn't want to talk to her. So she had already had her dad out of her life all those years. And now she has to hear her father say such horrible things to her. So the damage that the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force did to these children. Yikes. Um, the next section says Brandon Yang, son of Marni Yang, and it doesn't say how old he was at questioning, and I can't remember what the age difference is between the twins and Brandon. Brandon, the youngest of Ms. Yang's children, was also present at the residence when law enforcement officers arrived to execute a search warrant. Brandon stated that officers arrived, got in his face, and then proceeded to question him and his siblings. I want to say he was like 11, somewhere between like 11 and 13 at this time. They got in his face. Um, Brandon also claims that they were taken into custody and brought to the police station for further questioning. Sup, cat? He states that they were in police custody for approximately 12 hours that day. Impact of Ms. Yang's family interactions with law enforcement. There are two main concerns relative to the reliability and voluntariness of Ms. Yang's confession that are directly correlated to Andrew, Emily, and Brandon Yang's interaction with law enforcement. First is the potential contamination of the confession. Throughout the evidence process, law enforcement officers made several claims of innocence, some that existed and some that did not, towards Ms. Yang's children. For example, investigators placed a bucket of concrete mix on the table when interrogating Andrew Yang, claiming that the murder weapon was contained within the bucket. I hate that they're allowed to lie to you. These multiple interactions with family members of Ms. Yang yielded details of the crime being unveiled, subsequently contaminating their own statements to law enforcement as well as Ms. Yang's. As stated above, Emily provided her statement to the police only for the story to be altered and modified multiple times. The altering of a subject's statement is commonly seen in contaminated confession cases. Waterboarding. This is why waterboarding is stupid. Now, don't get me wrong, when somebody's this horrible terrorist and they've done things, there's been times in my past prior to getting involved in wrongful convictions and seeing all that goes down. It's like, yeah, torture those guys, torture them. I don't care. But you're not going to get the truth out of them for when you waterboard them that they think they're drowning and gonna die. They're gonna say whatever it is they need to say. I think it was Jesse Ventura. And yes, I know he was a wrestler and he was then he was what? Was he the governor of Minnesota or a mayor? I can't remember what it was, his title was. But he also was in the military and special forces. And so he's a big one that tells you he's against waterboarding because this big, huge, muscular, dude and everything, he's like, I'm going to tell you whatever you need to know. So you will make the stop. So using these kinds of techniques, it doesn't have to be as extreme as waterboarding. A thing of say this so you can talk to your dad, who you haven't heard from in years. You're not going to get the truth out of. It's going to be, I'm going to say whatever it is you want me to say. And then they kept making Emily change it as they're, fleshing out their narrative more of no, now say it did this. And that's not what our law enforcement should be. We're supposed to be about, because at the end of the day, Ronnie Ryder, who was also pregnant at the time, a murder occurred. Somebody did this to her. And that person absolutely should be in prison. Or if you see, I can't do death penalty anymore. I used to be death penalty, but not until wrongful convictions. But that person should be punished. And by you just wanting to fit a narrative, you're now giving that person the opportunity to do this to other people. So forcing a false confession out of a 16-year-old girl to get her to say things to implicate her mother so she can talk to her deadbeat dad. You're severely broken inside if you do this to a child. Well, if you do it to anybody, but really to do it's just sickening to me. Impact of Ms. Yang's family interactions with law enforcement. Did I read that already? I did read that already. See? Mm-mm-mm. Okay. The second issue that arises from the interrogations of Ms. Yang's children is her fear that law enforcement will pursue one of her children, specifically Andrew, as the suspect of this crime. Based on the review of statements, police reports and affidavits detailing the above interactions, it is reasonable to believe that there was a viable fear on behalf of Ms. Yang that her children could be wrongfully implicated in this crime. This is also relevant as Ms. Yang proclaimed this fear to her father, Mr. Marar. According to Mr. Marar's affidavit, it is stated that Ms. Yang wanted to protect Andrew and decided to make shit up in a confession to achieve that goal. Christy Passion, friend of Marni Yang. Christy, an essential player in obtaining the confession of Ms. Yang, was a close friend of Miss Yang. I don't know how close they really were, but and stated that she was aware of the relationship between Ms. Yang and Mr. Gale as early as 2006. This is just me speaking on my perceptions of what I know about this case and my visits with Marni, and just what I know of Marni in this case. Marni's a fixer of wounded animals. And that's what Christy Passion was. Christy Passion is a very bizarre individual. And I'm going to say Christy Passion was probably somebody who didn't really have any friends, or because and so Marni was a friend to her, because Marni was a friend to the friendless. Let's put it that way. So it's not like, they were BFFs having slumber parties and braiding each other hair type thing. It's just, this was this odd person that she met at an event and became friends. According to multiple statements made by Ms. Passion to the Lake County Major Crime Task Force, she was interviewed by investigators and then placed at a local motel for, quote, convenience and well-being, unquote. Throughout the course of Ms. Passion's statements, ranging from February 27th to March 2nd, she claims to remember additional details and provide further information in each. Ms. Passion claims in her first statement on February 27, 2009, that Ms. Yang confessed details of the crime to her, including wearing a disguise and renting a vehicle. Ms. Passion also claims that Ms. Yang stated that she fired the weapon at Miss Ryder, causing the victim to fall backwards to the ground. The following day, Kathy. Oh, thank you. And that's why, Kathy, these last so long, because of my squirrel, going off and having to comment on everything. Um, mm, 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 mm. Ms. Passion claims in her first statement on February 27, 2009. Oh, I read that. Ms. Passion. Okay, I read that too. The following day, February 28th, 2009, Ms. Passion provides another statement to investigators, claiming that she left out details in her original statement. Kind of sound familiar to Emily, right? Additional details in this statement included claims of Ms. Yang planning the crime, as well as more specific information about Ms. Yang's disguise she wore during the incident. Ms. Passion reasserts the claim that Ms. Yang placed the gun in a bucket of concrete and then buried it in a forest preserve. On March 2nd, 2009, Ms. Passion writes another statement claiming she remembered more details about the incident and detailed them in her narrative. In this statement, Ms. Passion states that Ms. Yang looked around Miss Ryder's apartment taking an ultrasound photograph, paperwork, a hospital band, and a medical alert bracelet. Additionally, Ms. Passion claims that she forgot she was the one who discarded license plates into a dumpster and then further detailed the location of where Ms. Yang stated to have buried clothes, the wig, and gun grips. Ms. Passion then agreed to be wired with an audio recording device and arranged 2 meetings with Ms. Yang in effort to obtain a recorded statement detailing the above. It is on these recordings that Ms. Yang provides a confession utilized to aid in her conviction and the substance of this report. Impact of Ms. Passion's family interactions with law enforcement. As stated, the recording device worn by Ms. Passion captured the confession given by Ms. Yang that is the scope of this report. There are two main issues that are derived from Ms. Passion's extensive interaction with law enforcement. First, like Ms. Yang's children, Ms. Passion is subjected to multiple interviews as well as presented multiple pieces of evidence, some factual and some not. Ms. Passion states that investigators told her they had evidence linking them to the crime scene and even produced some tangible evidence, such as the rental car receipt and phone records. Due to these multiple interrogations by law enforcement, Ms. Passion was exposed to several details of the crime prior to her wearing the audio recording device. Additionally, as Ms. Passion's statements continue to add more details, we see a similarity to the process of obtaining a statement from Emily Yang. Multiple additional specific details continue to be added to the statements with interactions from law enforcement occurring simultaneously. Secondly, Ms. Passion also presents the viable thought that the investigators will pursue criminal charges towards herself, one of Ms. Yang's children, or Ms. Yang. According to Ms. Passion, investigators make statements such as, quote, "This is your chance, take it or leave it," unquote, regarding her cooperation in this investigation. Ms. Passion details these interactions to Ms. Yang on the audio recording, furthering Ms. Yang's viable fear that the investigators will not stop pursuing her family or those associated with her. Yeah, right, Kat? It is also important to note that on the audio recording, which contains Ms. Yang's confession, Ms. Passion provides multiple details of the crime in the form of suggestive statements and leading questions. Statements such as, quote, "We dumped the wig, we dumped the gun," unquote, and, quote, "That stuff back in the bushes, I don't know what you put back there. I have a memory you told me. You stood in the door, stuff on the counter. Did you take anything?" Unquote. It is unknown the source of these details, but there is potential contamination as this information was presented after Ms. Passion was working with the task force for several days prior to the confession. It should be noted that an interview with Ms. Passion, conducted by Perry Myers of the post conviction team, yielded further information regarding her state of mind. This interview, filed on November 14, 2019, details Ms. Passion's claims that she had a fear of being charged with the murder and did not believe Marni had anything to do with it. So, once again, you're making this threat that you're going to go down for it unless you say what they want. So people have that, I'm going to protect myself. No, so all right, I'm going to tell you what you want. It's scary. Next section's titled Confession Reliability, and we're on page 39 of 77. In an effort to analyze the reliability of Ms. Yang's confession, I have taken her admissions and evaluated them against any potential corroborating evidence, as well as noting any contamination in her confession. This method of evaluating the reliability of a confession is a standard for experts in this field and routinely performed by investigators in critiquing the validity of their confessions. The column designated as detail will refer to any admissions that Ms. Yang made during her recorded conversation with Christy Passion. The details listed below are anything relative to the crime in which corroborating evidence would be able to either support or disprove in her statements. The column labeled as corroboration will list either a IND, which is independent, dependent, or non-applicable. Applicable. To qualify as independent corroboration would require the details provided by Ms. Yang in her confession were previously unknown by investigators. These details would then be able to be confirmed through investigative measures after the confession. To qualify as dependent corroboration would require the details provided by Ms. Yang in her confession would be supported by evidence that may have already been known by investigators. Although this type of corroboration is common and important in investigations, it also contains a risk of contamination, as investigators have the ability to provide these details to the suspect prior to their confession. The column labeled evidence will explain the available evidence relative to the detail. The evidence may be a combination of what was presented at the original trial, as well as the additional forensic expertise that has been submitted since then. Lastly, the column labeled contamination will highlight if the detail provided by Ms. Yang would have been previously known to her through the interrogations by law enforcement, interactions with her friends and family, or common knowledge obtained through the media. The goal of this analysis is to determine the amount of details provided by Ms. Yang that are independently corroborated by evidence without having been contaminated through the investigative process. Marni Yang's confession contained details related to the crime, including the act itself, the the disposal of materials affiliated with the alleged, as well as explanations of other evidence that was mentioned by law enforcement. As stated earlier, it is common for false or involuntary confessions to contain this level of detail, especially in high profile cases. This case specifically was covered heavily by the media due to the relationship of Miss Ryder and Sean Gale. Many of the details, including Miss Ryder's pregnancy and Mr. Gale's multiple relationships, 17, was it 17 known of at that time? Um, Multiple relationships became well known in the media. However, a more impactful source of contamination regarding Miss Yang's confession comes from the law enforcement interviews and interrogations of both Ms. Yang and her friends and family. Ms. Yang was in custody of the Lake County Task Force for multiple days, provided photographs of the crime scene and other details during these conversations. Ms. Yang is also privy to details shared by law enforcement in her conversations with Christy Passion, which is noted on the auto recording from March 2nd, 2009. So the first issue is the disposal of the weapon. Detail provided by Marni Yang. It's gone. I put it into a bucket of cement. I put it in a dumpster. Type of corroboration, non-applicable. Available evidence, no weapon was recovered. Potential contamination. Investigators discussed the weapon, specifically a 9mm, with Miss Yang while in custody prior to her confession. And investigators placed a bucket of cement in front of Andrew during interrogations. Next issue is the medical bracelet from the crime scene. Detail provided by Marni Yang. I did not take anything. I barely walked into the place. I saw nothing. It was dark in the kitchen and I didn't see hardly anything. I didn't touch anything. I didn't take anything. Type of corroboration, non-applicable. Contrary evidence has been presented that suggests Miss Ryder never possessed this item. Available evidence, medical bracelet recovered that is alleged to have been taken by Ms. Yang from Miss Ryder's residence. Report by investigator Frost states that he interviewed 7 of Miss Ryder's friends, none of which could identify the bracelet. Other witnesses did claim to identify the bracelet as Miss Ryder's. Genetic ID forensic test results exclude Miss Ryder as a contributor to the DNA profile on the bracelet. And let me just tell you, this bracelet is freaking ugly. And not that I knew Ronnie Ryder, I don't see her wearing this ugly bracelet. Sorry, Terrell, I can't talk to you right now. So there's absolutely nothing that says that she owned this bracelet, and it was just a way of law enforcement trying to make some pieces fit. Next issue, crime scene, description of scene. Detail provided by Marni Yang. It was dark in the kitchen. I never got far enough in there to see anything. Her leg was sticking out in the hallway. I had to kick it inside. Type of corroboration, DEP. Contradictory evidence is dictated in crime scene photos. Available evidence, Ms. Ryder's leg was not positioned near the door as stated by Ms. Yang according to crime scene photos. I have seen crime scene photos, and this was it or is one of my big issues, that if you search the Marni Yang case and you watch, like, Oxygen did something on it, and I think 2020's done something on it. I can't remember which ones did it. But one of the big deals that they make is they're like, so one of the last things that the victim did since she was pregnant is she's cradling her pregnant belly and trying to protect her unborn child. And so even the reenactment on one of the shows is shows Ronnie laying on her back with her arms across her belly. She's on her stomach with her car keys in one of her hands, because she was getting ready to leave for work. I think she was going to the gym and going to work. So she had different clothes in a bag. Um, she had a lunch with her, all this stuff. So she's on her stomach and her keys in her hand and a bag in her hand and um so it's like, if you get that detail wrong, that you're changing that just to make a better story that she's cradling her belly, how much everything else you're telling is not true. This is already a sad, tragic story that this pregnant woman lost her life in such a brutal way. You don't need to dramatize it that she's cradling her belly. And so this of her leg was sticking out of the hallway and I had to kick it in. It's where she's in that kitchen, the size of the kitchen, every it's just science doesn't support it. It didn't happen. So it's Marnie making shit up because she wasn't there. So she doesn't know that's not possible for her to have done those things because she doesn't know. She knows some things, not all. So she makes shit up. Um, Potential contamination. Crime scene photos were shown to Miss Yang while in custody. Next issue with the crime scene is description of victim's reaction. Detail provided by Marni Yang. She started screaming. All she was doing was screaming. Type of corroboration is a witness statement. Available evidence. Neighbor states to have heard muffled shots, a short scream, and a crash. Excuse me, hiccuping. Potential contamination. Investigators discussed the crime scene, including the victim's response and motives with Ms. Yang while in custody prior to her confession. And then also media coverage also detailed the witness's perspective in initiating the 911 call. Next issue at the crime scene is the firing of weapon. Detail provided by Marni Yang. I took the first shot because I heard screaming. I took maybe 1 or 2 steps into the kitchen. I started emptying the clip. Type of corroboration. Crime scene photographs and trajectory evidence contradict positioning and height of shooter. I'm going to have to do a video at some point with my husband, and should do it with Steve and um, I believe it was Perry too. Perry Myers. I believe he owns a gun like the one that they keep talking about in this. And my husband has the gun too. And um last week I went over the gun stuff with my husband. My husband is a huge gun enthusiast. And so he was showing me things about that gun, and the clearing of the gun because there were misfires, and me not being a gun person, you know, and then so he got the actual gun, or not the actual gun from this, but he's got the same gun, and then he put in orange rubber bullets. And so he was able to show me now when, um, if you were to have a misfire and the trajectory of where those would go and where they would land. It was very educational for me, being, like I said, somebody not knowing anything, because that was something my husband wanted to see on this, is in crime scene photos, where were the, and I'm using the wrong words again, I don't know if they're bullets, shells, casings, whatever, but he wanted to see where they were, because depending on the ones that were actually fired that came out of the gun, and then the ones, because there were X amount that this gun was misfiring. Actually, my husband's got a whole thing on what that misfire actually was. And I found it fascinating. So we're definitely going to have to do that at some point, because it absolutely explains everything. And also goes to show that it couldn't be Marni. And I'm looking right now. Where is it? Where is it? Because I have here somewhere. Is it in here? Hmm. I have it somewhere. On one of my visits with Marni, it's going to drive me nuts looking for it. On one of my visits with Marni in the prison, I had her draw her hand on a piece of paper, and I took it home with me. Because now remember, I tell you, she's an itty bitty little thing. Um, her hands are not going to be able to do this stuff. I'm just saying. I, I'm getting too distracted, and this is as long as it is, but I'll find it for a future thing. Or you can go in the Marni Yang section on this YouTube too, because I've done past videos on this case, and her hand's probably on there. But I'm telling you, like, the tips of her fingers come to like here on my hand. She's wee little lassie. Um, ugh, okay, let me go back into reading. Um, mm, mm, mm. Okay. So, available evidence. Forensic analysis concludes that the shooter was 5'10" or taller. The shooter stepped into the kitchen threshold and fired the first shot as Ryder opened the door. This shot created a near contact wound. Ryder was, quote, bladed to the left with her right shoulder extended towards the shooter, unquote. The near contact shot, combined with Ryder's retreating position, resulted in her feet being positioned away from the door. Potential contamination. Crime scene information was discussed with Miss Yang while in custody prior to her confession. Next crime scene issue, positioning of body. Detail provided by Marni Yang. Quote, she went backwards into the kitchen, fell against the counter, hit the floor, was all in shadows. Type of corroboration. Crime scene photographs contradict the positioning of the victim. Available evidence. Paramedics found Ryder lying face down on the kitchen floor. Potential contamination. Investigators discussed the crime scene with Ms. Yang while in custody prior to the confession. Next issue, disposal of items, gun clip. Detail provided by Marni. It was an empty clip. I buried it. Empty 9mm clip that I pushed it down in the dirt. Type of corroboration, non-applicable. Available evidence, no clip was recovered at the location. Potential contamination, investigators discussed murder weapon in multiple interviews, including Ms. Yang's prior to confession. Next issue is the rental car. Detail by Marni. I took it back. They gave me a black car. I had taken the plates off another vehicle. Type of corroboration, rental car agreement. Available evidence, supplemental forensic video review concludes that the 2008 Volkswagen Rabbit rented by Ms. Yang was not the vehicle noted on this Shell station video. Potential contamination. According to Ms. Passion, the rental car agreement was shown to her during her interviews, in addition to conversations with Ms. Yang prior to her confession. Next issue is prepaid cell phone. Marni said, I bought the prepaid cell phone with cash. Type of corroboration, transactional records. Available evidence, cell phone records obtained by investigators. Potential contamination. This information was discussed with Ms. Passion as well as Ms. Yang by investigators prior to Yang's confession. Let me talk about the cell phone. The prepaid cell phone was for her 16-year-old daughter, who kept breaking or losing phones. And so Marnie's done with giving her a decent phone. You're going to get one of these pay-as-you-go cheapo stupid phones. And then Emily's a 16-year-old girl. I don't know what she was being punished for. I don't remember. But Marni didn't let her have the phone. That's what the phone was for. And then that's why the phone was in Marnie's possession, not Emily's. You know, there's nothing sneaky about it. And what would be the reason that if Marni was planning to commit this, what does she need a prepaid cell phone for? It's just dumb to try and say because she's got a prepaid cell phone, it means she murdered somebody. It was for her daughter. It's just dumb. Um, Next issue, appearance, disguise, detail provided by Marty. I had a wig on. I had dark sunglasses, this big covering my face. I had a hoodie on. I had dark makeup on my face, and I had glasses on. I was halfway to your house before I took the wig off. You couldn't see my face. Type of corroboration, witness statement provided. Available evidence, witness states to have seen a black male subject, because now you're trying to say Marni Yang's wearing blackface, somebody who was dating Sean Gale, who, if you don't know, is a black man. So now you're trying to say Marni Yang, a Jew who knows about being a minority and would wear blackface. Um, her saying she's got dark makeup on is not saying I wore blackface. Don't get it twisted. Um, all right. So the witness states to have seen a male black subject, short curly wig, naturally dark skin. Witnesses did not state they observed subject wearing sunglasses or gloves, contrary to Ms. Yang's statement. None of these items have been recovered or identified. Potential contamination. Cameron did not suspect makeup was used or the subject was female on 10/29/07. In a follow-up interview on 11/08, she then states that the jawline could have matched Miss Yang and may have had makeup on. Contamination of this statement is unknown. So again, the witnesses, like everybody else, is being questioned and questioned and questioned until you're going to give them what they wanted. Can I tell you where the wig thing comes from? It's because they have a receipt that Marni had bought not a wig, she had bought a wig cap. And what was this wig cap for? Now, I didn't have this at my high school. But I know so many high schools did, and the first thing I always think of in this instance too is It's a Wonderful Life, when they go to the dance and the dance floor is over the pool. But so lots of schools, part of their gym class was swimming. And so Emily is this 16-year-old girl going to high school. She's got gym. I think gym was like first period. It was early in the day. She doesn't want to get her hair wet. Oh, no worries, Kathy. Um, she doesn't want to get her hair wet. So she's getting in trouble in school because now she's not participating in gym. And then when Marnie finds out about it, it's like, you are doing this and I'm going to get you a swim cap. So going to get you. That's what that was for. In an argument with, and I that may have even been why Emily was being punished and couldn't have a cell phone, is because she wasn't doing her gym class like she was supposed to be. So that's where, since now you have that Marnie bought this swim cap, so we're going to say she used it to wear a wig. So it's just trying to do anything to make their narrative stick. But really, when you hear the actual facts, that's the thing. Lies are hard because it doesn't make sense, because it's not actual. But when you hear it's because Emily had swimming first thing in the morning, because I would have been the same thing in high school. So I'm not getting in a pool first thing in the morning when I get here. No way. So, and then Marnie's like, you're going to wear a swim cap. Well, I still would go, I'm not putting that freaking thing on my head. It looks stupid and it's going to ruin your hair. How you already styled it. I get it. But that's where now it's going to be, oh, let's get it. So she was wearing a wig and putting on blackface. How offensive. I'm offended for Marnie that they're accusing her of wearing blackface. That's disgusting to me. All right, conclusion of analysis. The summary of findings is detailed in part 1 of this report as an overview of the opinion regarding the reliability and voluntariness, is that the word, of Ms. Yang's confession. The analysis in part 4 of this report is a comprehensive review serving as the basis for the summary. After a thorough review of Ms. Yang's confession, it is clear her statements are contaminated through her prior in-custody interactions with law enforcement, as well as the multiple interviews and interrogations that her family members and close personal friends were subjected to. Additionally, the media coverage of this case created more transparency to the available details, especially as Ms. Yang's confession came more than a year after the crime occurred. As detailed above, statements made by Ms. Yang were all previously known to her through one of these sources. Although this does not eliminate their potential for being accurate, it does yield doubt to the ability of independent corroboration of these details. It is also of high probability that Ms. Yang's statements are consistent with those of a voluntary false confessor, as well as a coerced compliant confessor. The voluntariness of Ms. Yang's statements appears to be derived from her reasonable fear that her son would be wrongfully implicated in this crime if she did not confess. In reviewing the strategies used against Andrew Yang, Emily Yang, and Christy Passion by investigators, it is reasonable to believe that Ms. Yang had a legitimate concern for their wrongful classification as being involved in this crime. Consistent with a coerced, compliant confessor, it is of high likelihood that Ms. Yang decided to confess while still maintaining her innocence due to a risk-benefit analysis. As detailed above, a coerced, compliant confessor often is left with the decision to confess as no other option seemed viable at the time due to the nature of the interrogation or simultaneous investigative measures. The above opinions and analysis are based on the information provided to me at the time of this report. If additional details are uncovered or further information is disclosed, I reserve the right to review and update my opinion and analysis accordingly. So that's David Thompson. And then his work cited. Affidavit of Emily. And it is just that she's reviewed the paragraphs that is cited what she said, and she's affirming that those are true. And then the next one is from Andrew saying the same thing. Affidavit from Jesse Delgado. This is important too. I, Jesse Delgado, being first duly sworn on oath, deposes and says, I am 27 years of age with a birthday of blah, 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 and reside at blah, blah, blah. That in 2007, I was a friend of Marni Yang's son, Andrew Yang, and spent a substantial amount of time in the Yang house while I was a teenager. That Marni Yang opened her house to many of Andrew Yang's friends, including me, by offering us a safe place to hang out. She did this to help keep us away from the gangs in the area. That I knew Marni Yang owned a handgun, as I had seen Marni cleaning the gun on at least one occasion while at the Yang home. Let me just tell you, this was a gun she inherited from an uncle when he died. Okay, so it wasn't like, this is my gun for home protection. She inherited the gun. That in May 2007, during the Memorial Day weekend, I was desperate for money and stole a Beretta 9mm handgun, as well as a Sony PlayStation and other items. Like I know an underwater camera was one of the things he stole, from the house of Marni Yang. And I then sold the 9mm Beretta and items for $800 in cash in order to pay a debt. That on a night in January 2008, I was awakened in my home by police detectives who took me outside to their squad car in my sleep, where I was questioned. That during this questioning, I was asked if I knew Marni Yang owned a handgun, and I told them I did, and that in fact I stole it. That my reasoning for admitting that I stole the gun to the police was I thought the police were questioning me concerning the theft, and that they had somehow learned that I had stolen it. That after I had told the police detectives this information, they seemed to want to change the subject of conversation and did not seem interested in this information and questioned me about Marni. That upon reviewing the report of my interview by the police detectives, the report did not include a truthful statement concerning my knowledge of the gun, but they had totally omitted the fact that I had confessed to stealing the gun. That everything in this statement is true to the correct to the best of my knowledge. So when the police show up at this kid's house, he thinks they're there to question him because he stole stuff from Marni's house. He's not thinking of this crime that occurred a year and a half ago that he probably didn't really pay all that much attention to or care about. So that's what he thinks they're there for. So when they're asking, do you know she had a gun? And he's like, yeah, because he thinks they're there, that he's now about to get arrested because he stole that gun. And this happened well before this crime occurred. So that gun was gone. But because they know that Marni had this gun that she inherited when an uncle in Florida died, we're going to say that's the gun that committed this crime that literally was not in Marni's possession. The kid stole it. Affidavit of Arthur Borchers. When Larson Forensics and Affiliates became involved, the investigation and reconstruction of the Ronnie Ryder homicide, we were required to take a comprehensive look at an event that took place in a matter of seconds, but with consequences that are still playing out. I thought that was, I don't know if that's the words that Arthur used, but I found that really deep. It took place in a matter of seconds, but with consequences that are still playing out. In brief, at about 8 a.m. on the morning of October 4, 2007, Ronnie Ryder was shot and killed in the kitchen of her residence at blah, blah, blah. The offender was not actually seen committing the crime. A witness reported an unknown black male. See, that's why they have to say that Marni's in blackface, because witness originally reported a black guy was there. A witness reported an unknown black male being seen leaving the area shortly afterwards. This person was described as a 13 to 14 years of age with curly hair running to a black mid-sized sedan. The witness could not recall anything about his clothing or build. In a later interview, the description became more expressive. Deerfield police officers responded to the scene based on a neighbor's 911 call. The officers clearly had no trouble accessing the Ryder residence and finding her body on the floor because this is a condo and she's on the second floor in the building. Um, the police reports failed to document if the kitchen door was found slightly ajar or wide open. In either case, Deerfield Fire Department personnel soon confirmed that Ronnie Ryder was deceased. The Lake County Major Crimes Task Force was mobilized to start an investigation. In simple terms, the scene revealed that Ryder was carrying a large black tote bag over her right shoulder, her car keys in her right hand, and a plastic Whole Foods bag was found nearby. 7 fired 9mm cartridges were scattered around the kitchen floor. And 9mm is a very common caliber that can be used in multiple different guns. It's not like one brand gun only can use that gun or use that cartridge. Um, okay, so 5 live 9mm. Okay, 7 were fired. 5 live 9mm jacketed hollow point cartridges were also found on the floor and under the tote bag. This indicates that the live cartridges were on the floor before Ryder fell because, on top of it. 2 fired bullets were found on the kitchen floor. 1 bullet was within the blood pool near Ryder's head in front of the refrigerator. The other bullet was found on a floor mat in front of the kitchen sink, but behind the exit door. Another fired bullet was found inside the kitchen's black plastic garbage can. A fourth and final fired bullet was found on the dining room floor just outside the kitchen doorway. Exhibit 1 is a scene diagram compiled by the experts from police reports and scene photographs. It is drawn to rough scale and represents the positions of items as best as can be determined. Exhibit 1 also records the positions of items and evidence not included in the police diagram. And you're going to have to go to freemarniying.com and go click on the case files, and then you can see this diagram. During the scene analysis, anomalies were noted that were not explained in the police reports. These include particulate debris on the top of the stove and nearby counters in the southeast area of the kitchen. The locations of a bullet hole in the north kitchen wall with corresponding exit in the south dining room hall, an impact point on the dining room floor, and an impact point on the east dining room wall were not measured and included in the police reports. These locations were determined through detailed photographic analysis and detailed herein. Another anomaly is the bullet impact and fired projectile recovery from the black plastic garbage can within the kitchen. Prior to this writing, no police image of the bullet hole in the can in its original location had been identified. However, a careful review of police images searching for this evidence located 2 images taken during the initial stages of their crime scene investigation. The only specific evidence images taken by the police of this hole and the recovery of the fired bullet inside the can were taken after the can was moved from the kitchen into the dining room. No explanation for this discovery oversight was included in any police report. All right, this is giving the numbers to evidence. So I'm not going to go over that. Okay, so based on all that, the garbage can bullet was never examined for biological or other physical evidence. This bullet that actually went through the victim and into the garbage can, they did it, went put a hole in the garbage can. The location of the garbage can was not measured or recorded in police reports or their diagram. The physical location of the bullet within the blood pool and the impact site to the floor in front of the refrigerator were also not recorded in police reports or their diagram. 4 fired bullets were recovered from Ryder's body during the autopsy. With the 4 fired bullets from the scene, we have a total of 8 shots fired during the incident. A total of 7 fired cartridges cases were recovered from the scene. No comment on the discrepancy is made in the police reports, nor was any effort documented to check the footwear of scene personnel, or was the scene itself re examined, i.e., looking under the stove or dishwasher in effort to find the missing cartridge case. My husband thinks he knows where that is, but maybe I should save that for whenever we do an actual video on that. When they examined the court exhibits held by the Lake County Court Clerk's Office in March 2018, we found photographs documenting the use of lasers and rods to investigate the trajectory of the bullet perforating the north kitchen wall. There is no police report documenting who engaged in this effort, when it occurred, and what, if any, results were found. Digital images involved with this case had been turned over previously, but they did not include these images. Prints of some film-based photographs were made available in October 2018. Police reports document additional film-based photographs being taken, but have yet to be turned over. We continued to examine the crime scene photographs and made note of the plaster debris on the backsplash ledge of the east kitchen wall. We then realized that there was a previously unidentified bullet impact site on the east kitchen wall and was hidden from view below the bottom of the upper cabinets. So, I mean, these police did not do a good job with this crime scene at all. According to the former, access to the former Ryder residence is currently unavailable. The actual height of these cabinets above the floor is unknown. However, accepted construction practice and building standards would predict the bottom edge of the upper cabinets would be 18 to 20 inches above the countertop and 54 to 56 inches above the floor. The construction standard height for lower countertop height is typically 36 inches. Our analysis of Ryder's wounds is documented in the Lake County Coroner's Office autopsy report, discounted the trial testimony of Dr. Manuel Montes, who's another. Montes asserted that the first shot fired was wound C, down into Ryder's abdomen. Our analysis showed that wound B to Ryder's upper left chest was in fact a contact wound. Wound B traveled from right to left, from front to back and down before exiting Ryder's upper left arm. So, not an expert here, not pretending to be an expert, but obviously, if it's contact, it's gonna be the first shot. She's opening the door to go to work, and somebody's standing out there to ambush her, takes a step in and shoots her in the chest where the gun is touching her close to her chest. That's obviously going to be the first one. Remember, this was done in seconds. Bam, 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 bam. All that's going. So, first initial one, then as she's turning away and falling back, the person keeps shooting. So, the muzzle is going to be farther away from the victim. You're not walking up closer and closer. She's falling away as you're shooting. So the one that's got contact on it that you can see from her clothes and her skin, that the gun was closer to her. So that's the first one that's going in here at a downward angle and coming out here. When you're opening your door and going to walk out, and all of a sudden somebody's shooting you, your hands aren't like this, especially if like what they want to say is she's going to try and protect her unborn baby. Your hands are down. You're trying to, because it's, you open the door and shots are being fired. You're instantly trying to protect, even though your hands and your arms aren't going to stop a bullet, but that's still your initial reaction, So she shot here and it's coming out. down here, downward motion to a 5'9" woman. And she is, where's that picture? Me, 5'7", she 4'9". Look at my shoulder to where hers are. How is somebody whose shoulder here going to be able to shoot me here at a downward angle? It is not possible. That is science. Did she bring a ladder? I'm going to stand out in the hallway of this condo on a work day in the morning where there's also a school bus stop that's out there too. This is during the day. 8 in the morning. She going to stand outside. I'm going to ambush her. I'm going to be on top of this ladder so I can shoot her. It's not possible. So, Monty Montez trying to say, because again, trying to go to that narrative that they want this to be more brutal, that the person was trying to get the baby, that's the whole purpose of, so the first shot's the belly, trying to shoot that baby. Montez testified at trial that this wound was in fact going up because Ryder's left arm was raised above her head at the time she was shot. This is not physically possible, as the bullet would have been required to change direction within Ryder's body. No effort was made to explain where the bullet from wound B went after exiting. Had the bullet in fact been going up, it would have impacted the upper cabinets themselves. A bullet impact to the cabinets would have been in plain sight. No bullet impact above the height of the north wall hole has been previously identified. Again, science and facts. There's no shots that are up that high. If her arm's raised and it's going like this to this and out, it's not. Didn't happen. Evidence bullet number 9 from the floor mat in front of the sink tested positive for the presence of blood. While photographs of the bullet in situ do not clearly exhibit the presence of blood or plaster dust, the ISP finding of hair supports that this bullet corresponds to wound B and the east wall impact site, after which the bullet rebounded to its recovered position on the floor. The Lake County Major Crimes Task Force eventually pursued Marni Yang and Andrew Yang as their primary suspects due to Marni's sexual relationship with Sean Gale, the reported father of Ronnie Ryder's unborn child. Marni Yang is a 4'11" to 5 tall woman. Based on the fired bullets and cartridge cases, NIRCL reported that firearms with matching unknown rifling characteristics included the Beretta 92, various Beretta clones, including Taurus, plus the Intratec Tech 9 and SWD Mac 11 pistols. Yang was known to own a Beretta 92 FS pistol prior to this incident. Yang's Beretta could not be located after the incident. Affidavits are on records that Lake County Major Crimes Task Force officers were told that Yang's pistol had been stolen from her home prior to the murder, and by whom. No record of these assertions is included in the police investigation reports. During the investigation, books were found in Yang's home detailing how to make a handgun silencer. This became an issue at trial, with the fact that the shots fired during the murder were not as loud as people expected. Let me continue with what they say before I pile onto that. We conducted live fire testing with a suppressor-equipped 9mm pistol and with the suppressor removed. Based on that testing and the readily apparent charring and tearing characteristics around wound B, a suppressor was not used in this homicide. The design of a standard Beretta 92F pistol will not allow the attachment of a suppressor without replacing the barrel. If one were attached by other means, i.e. hose clamp, because these were the stupid things that they said, hose clamp, the pistol would not function in a normal manner. An attempt to construct a suppressor using the same materials the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force identified, purchased at Home Depot, and proposed at trial could not be mounted on a standard Beretta 92F pistol. Let me pause right here because it's important for you all to know. Again, they're just trying to make evidence they find at Marni's home to fit the crime. Marni bought real estate. It's one of the things she did with Sean Gale. And also, Marni, being a single mom, would also fix up her own stuff. And so, a bathroom sink needed to be fixed. So, she had gone to Home Depot and bought PVC and clamps and stuff like this for this sink. And so from them digging in her garbage to find anything they could, um, they're like, aha. And because she had bought a book on how to make a silencer, that was for the ex-boyfriend Sal, who was a cop. And she had bought that for him for like a gag gift of how to make a silencer. Um, and having that stuff, they're like, this must mean she tried to make a silencer with it. It is not possible. You cannot, and experts have tried to take that stuff and make a silencer out of it and put it on a Beretta F92 FS or whatever the frick it's called. It's not possible. Can't do it. Doesn't happen. You can't put the silencer on it. And then the next thing, and they cover this too, but since I'm on this rant right now, there's no evidence going through a bullet, going through PVC. There would be pieces of the PVC places. You would find it. It would be on Ronnie. It would be on clothes. This isn't a real good way to suppress a bullet being fired out of a gun. So it's going to get destroyed during the thing. You would find evidence of this suppressor, but you don't. But because she bought this book and because she bought plumbing supplies, it means she bought a suppressor. This girl yeah, she's been to the range a couple times. Sal, the cop boyfriend, um, she's not going to be able to make a suppressor. And science, again, it's science, it's facts. There's no way you can attach a PVC. We got to do this video with my husband with the actual gun and show you it's not possible. You can't do it. Can't do it. All right. Had a silencer like the book design been used, trace amounts of steel wool would have been expelled by each shot fired. No trace of steel wool was found when we had the opportunity to examine Ryder's shirt. Having worked in a police station where a shooting range is located on the same level as the rest of the facility, I can personally attest that a closed or partially closed door, as well as distance and hallway corners, have a significant effect on the sound of shots of all types being fired, example, handgun, rifle, and shotgun. I have also been present within 50 to 75 feet when two different negligent firearm discharge incidents occurred just outside of the range. While the sound was not as distinct as being within a short distance of actual shots being fired, but were still obvious shots. That's why it's not really called a silencer. It's called a suppressor. You know, those of us who don't really know guns and you just see what's in the movies or whatever, they always say silencer. You cannot silence the firing of a gun. You can only suppress it. You can only muffle it. It's still going to make a sound. We had no evidence to explain the reason 5 live cartridges were found on Ryder's kitchen floor. My husband does. Um, um, they confirmed that these rounds were cycled through the pistol used to fire all the other cartridges from this incident. To suggest any explanation here would be unsupportable speculation. To reiterate the wound B characteristics, the bullet traveled right to left, front to back, and slightly down. The entry was 13.5 inches below Ryder's head. The exit was 15 inches below her head. Ryder was recorded at being 5 feet 9 inches or 69 inches tall. At the time of the shooting, she was wearing ballet flat style shoes, which would add no appreciable amount to her overall height. Remember, she's pregnant and swollen ankles and all that. She was wearing comfortable flats. Therefore, using subtraction, the wound B entry wound was 55.5 inches above the floor, and the wound B exit was 54 inches above the floor. Recall that the cabinets would be between 54 and 56 inches above the kitchen floor, meaning that the bullet had unimpeded flight to the wall under the cabinets. The approximate overall dimensions of the Ryder kitchen are 9 feet by 10 feet. This is a small little condo. So this kitchen is just a small little galley kitchen. The counters and stove would extend 24 inches out from the walls. Based on the visible floor tile pattern, the open kitchen floor space is approximately 7 feet by 8 feet. Using the 12-inch square floor tile pattern as a guide, see, and I just love this. These are people that know their shit. And, the amount they're going into, and these are paid people. It doesn't matter to them, just like when I talk about it, doesn't matter to them one way or another if Marni is guilty or innocent. They're going to investigate it, and what science tells them is what they're going to tell you. And for them to do all these measurements and everything, it's just like, I just find it brilliant. Okay. Um, the kitchen exit door is approximately 30 inches wide. There's about 40 inches of wall space to the south of the doorway and about 40 inches of wall space to the north. It should be noted that this north section of wall forms the foyer wall for the primary residence entry door, which is immediately adjacent or perpendicular to the kitchen door. So at this condo, she had two doors. So one that, like, when people come to visit you, would typically be coming through the front and go to that door. And then there's one that's, the back one that's probably closer to where how she would get down to go to her car. But even though, there's walls and stuff in the condo making the different rooms, the doors are pretty close together. Due to the proximity of the doors to one another, an assailant waiting in the hallway would be able to act whichever whichever door Ryder exited, because you're not sure which, so she's got these two doors, which one she's going to come out. So they're able to stand in that hallway, and no matter which one she came out, they're there. The reconstruction process takes a complex event and breaks it down into smaller and smaller segments to allow examination of each portion. Our live fire testing of shooting 7 live rounds and clearing 5 dummy cartridges established that this shooting could have occurred in as little as 13 to 15 seconds. 15 seconds. That's it. The actual time would be dependent on the assailant's skill level with the firearm, because now 13 seconds, and there's misfires. 5 misfires? I'm bad with numbers. Was it 5 misfires that they have to clear? But still 15 seconds. Bam, 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 bam. With the identification of the previously unknown bullet impact site on the east wall, the sequence of shots can now be discerned with higher confidence. Each shot can be logically tied into the scene and evidence. Shot 1. When Ryder opens her kitchen door, the assailant raises a pistol and pushes it forward through the doorway opening into contact with Ryder's left upper chest and fires. The bullet travels through Ryder's chest and shoulder muscles, exiting her upper left arm. The bullet travels across the kitchen and impacts the east wall under the cabinets. Since the wall is of solid firewall construction, the bullet does not penetrate but rebounds back, coming to rest on the mat in front of the sink. And they've got diagrams that go to freemarniyang.com and you can look at it. Before continuing, issues regarding the assailant must be addressed. The police and prosecution contention at trial were that Marni Yang is the assailant and is responsible for the death of Ronnie Ryder. Recall that Yang is 4 feet 11 inches or 59 inches tall, and Ryder was 5 feet 9 inches or 69 inches tall, so 10 inches taller. The B entry wound was about 55 and a half inches above the floor. The exit wound was 54 inches above the floor, and the estimated bullet impact site is about 54, hi Kathy, 54 to 56 inches above the floor. This allows the bullet impact site to remain out of plain view for taller standing persons. For Yang to fire this shot, her hand or hands holding the gun would be at a height of about 56 inches, which is slightly above her eye height. So she would shoot like this. This is not a standard firing position or one where a shooter can be sure that his or her shots are going to hit their intended target and also come back and hit you in the face. Given the intent involved, i.e., murder followed by fleeing the scene and the limited time constraint, it is more reasonable to believe that a normal point shoulder firing position was used. We have previously declared our opinion that the shooter was 5 feet 10 inches or taller in height. Remember, Marni, not an expert, but she dated a cop and had gone to the range with him. And I'm sure her, like when I've gone to the range with my husband, has shown me how to cup it, and my thumbs going like this or whatever. And you're holding out like this. So she's not gonna go like this because she absolutely Marnie. I wish I could. Where is her hand? I had it here at one point too. Ha ha! That's the actual size of Marnie's hand compared to my hand. Look at that. Look at her hand compared to my hand. Let me match up our thumbs here. She's got a teeny tiny little hand. So there's no way she's going to be able to shoot with one hand. She's going to have two hands above her eyes. She's going to shoot like this. She's not going to do that. And so she knows how to, from her cop boyfriend, she knows how to properly hold a gun. So she'd be holding like this, not above her head. Just it's not physically possible. The firing position presumption is evident in Dr. Montez's trial testimony, and I'm on page 64 of 77 now. And we've been going for over 2 hours. There you go, Kathy. Get with that out to the press. I mean, she even dated it. What does that say? Because she's saying M. Yang 6119. Is that what that says? That's how long ago this was? Teeny tiny little hand. Because I was just obsessed with that. I'm obsessed with she's just this teeny tiny little thing. And there's no way she can do this. Why is the picture never on top? Teeny tiny little thing compared to me. I'm in gym shoes. She's in gym shoes. Teeny tiny little thing. Look at where her shoulders are compared to where my shoulders are. Can she shoot me in the upper chest in a downward angle? And I'm 2 inches taller than Ronnie Ryder was? With this teeny tiny little hand? Nope. Nope, 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 nope. All right. So the firing position presumption is evident in Dr. Montez's trial testimony, where he contended that Ryder's left arm was raised up in the air, making the B wound an upward trajectory based on the height disparity of the two women. Because, see, again, he's trying to make the square peg fit in the round hole. When the obvious answer is by looking at the damage that was done to Ronnie's body, it's down. It was going down. The included body measurement charts generated by the PedBike 2000 Plus software program reveals that Yang's shoulder height is about 48 inches. Ryder's shoulder height is about 56 inches. A 5 foot 10 inch assailant shoulder height is about 57 inches. And then they've got this whole thing of ground to eye, 55.22 inches, length of hand, 6.37 inches, all this stuff. Go to Marni, freemarniyang.com if you want to read all that. But again, them doing their due diligence and literally no stone unturned by these experts. Given that the physical evidence shows that the B wound was the first shot fired after Ryder opened her door to leave and had car keys in her right hand, it is logical that Ryder opened the kitchen door with her left hand, leaving that hand in proximity of the doorknob. So you're going to open the door, walking out and closing the door behind you. To pull the door closed behind her. Therefore, it is unreasonable to believe that immediately after opening the door and somebody is there now coming at you with a gun, this arm's going to go up. And it's 15 seconds. Ryder, so therefore it is unreasonable to believe that immediately after opening the kitchen door, Ryder raised her left arm over her head. Shot 2. The wound B, Ryder backs away slightly from the threat and is slightly bent at the waist. She is then struck by shot C to the center of her abdomen. The bullet travels down through intestines, the edge of her uterus, and embeds in her left pelvic bone. At trial, it was presented that shot C was the first shot fired with the intent of targeting Ryder's unborn child. But of course, that makes, it's just trying to sensationalize and make this already horrific crime worse, because they like want it to be like Marni really is trying to target the child, when Marni could care less about anybody having his child. And if you're a scorned woman, you're just thinking about the other woman, not, so your target is just to kill the woman, because killing the woman kills a child, right? So doing this whole thing of going, oh, the intent is to get the baby, it's just trying to sensationalize it and try to make Marni look more of a monster. After receiving wounds B and C, Ryder begins to turn to her left, presenting the right side of her body to the shooter. Moving and turning an injury away from the injury cause is a direct human response. So that's, again, the left side that had been holding the door. She's laying on the floor with her keys still in her hand. That's how fast all of this goes before. Yeah. So opening the door, she's instantly shot to the left, go this way. She turns that way. Okay. Shot 3. Wound D is created when Ryder is shot in the right side of her pregnant abdomen. Because see, she's turning that way. So now she's shot on that right side. The bullet tracks through her intestines, fetus, and exit the left side of her abdomen to penetrate her extended left forearm. That's when her arm's up, because she's down. Yeah, she's no longer standing straight up. And exits the left side of her abdomen to penetrate her extended left forearm, creating wound G. At autopsy, wound B is described as traveling right to left and upward. Given the circumstances, it is reasonable that Ryder would be leaning to her left with her arm extended to break a fall, which would account for the actual downward shot angle. The trial contention that Ryder's left arm was protectively over her abdomen was previously ruled out due to impossible in-flight change of trajectory. Science. Shot 4. Ryder continued to turn to her left and receives wound F in the right buttock, hip, pelvis area, with the bullet embedding in the right pelvic bone. Because see, everywhere she's getting shot is lower on her body because she's going down in 15 seconds. So that's what all the shots are consistently going lower on her body as she's down. Shot 5. Ryder then receives wound E in her right back that perforates the right pelvic bone, her abdominal cavity, intestines, placenta, fetus, and the front of her uterus. The bullet lodges below the skin in the front left abdomen. The entry and rest positions are both 29 inches below the head, 40 inches above the floor, so it is likely that Ryder was still in a bent position when struck. Shot 6. The fatal shot was fired with Ryder on her knees or in a low crouch and her head turned to her left. I find it probable that Ryder would be glancing or looking to her left towards the assailant's threat as shot A was fired into the left back of her skull. Shot A traveled through the skull, the soft tissues of the neck, mouth, tongue, and floor of the mouth before exiting under the chin. The bullet then penetrated the side of the black plastic garbage can and remained inside. Close examination of the autopsy photographs reveals gunshot residue in Ryder's hair around the wound A entry. No mention of this is made in either the autopsy protocol or the police reports. Examination photos of wound A with the hair removed does not reveal any evidence or soot or charring on the skin. This indicates that the gun was fired within 1 to 3 feet of Ryder's head. Close review of the early crime scene photographs has identified 2 images of the can in place where the bullet hole can be seen, as well as a fragment of black plastic on the floor. The trajectory of the shot, based on the wound angle, probable head, body, and garbage can positions the trajectory to within +5 degrees of uncertainty. Shot 7. Ryder then began to fall right and forward to her ending position on the floor, with her head turned to the right and her hands on either side of her head. It is apparent that as Ryder fell, the assailant continued to fire, and the next shot struck and perforated the north kitchen wall. The trajectory of the shot can be mathematically determined based on extensive mathematical analysis of crime scene photographs within +5 degree of uncertainty. What time is it? Oh my gosh, it's almost 3:30. And the next shot struck and perforated the north kitchen wall. Oh, I already said that. The horizontal impact angle of the north wall is about 29 degrees away from the wall, with a downward trajectory angle of about 20 degrees, both +5 degrees. Shot 8. The final round fired occurred just as Ryder landed on the kitchen floor, with the bullet striking the floor near her head and rebounding to a few inches away. The police investigation became centered on Marni Yang and her son Andrew as the primary suspects. I will not detail the tactics and methods used by the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force, as they are covered in the police reports and by others. Eventually, the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force obtained a court order authorizing a consensual overhear with a covert recording device to be worn by Christy Passion. 2 separate conversations were recorded on March 2, 2009 and March 3, 2009. At the start of the first conversation, Passion stated to the recording device and to officers listening that she thought Yang had seen the recording device come out of her clothing. Yang also had previously told her parents that she was going to make shit up and lied to police to protect her son from charges by the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force. The telephone wiretap recordings of Yang's statements are lost or no longer exist. During the Passion recordings, Yang makes the following summary statements as to how her version of the shooting occurred. Yang stated she stood outside in the hallway outside the kitchen. Yang stated that she wore a hoodie, wig, dark makeup, gloves, and big sunglasses. When Ryder opened the door, Ryder started screaming, and Yang let her have it. Yang said she did not touch anything or take anything. Yang stated that the gun was placed in a bucket of cement and thrown into a dumpster in Chicago. Yang stated that after being shot, Ryder went across the kitchen, bumped into a counter. Yang stated the kitchen was dark and the floor was all in shadows. Yang stated she never went far enough inside to see how the kitchen was laid out. Yang said when Ryder was down, she kicked at Yang's legs. Yang said that she took 1 or 2 steps in and fired one last shot into Ryder's head. Yang said that one of Ryder's legs was sticking out into the hall, preventing her from closing the door, so she kicked it inside and slammed the door. Reviewing these statements against evidence of the scene and incident as known. It is unlikely that the initial witness statement describing a black male of undetermined height would miss the big sunglasses. The fact that this witness later revised his initial statement under subsequent police questioning is outside of the purposes of this report. Yang made no mention of the live rounds or any weapon malfunction. Letting her have it implies speed and no firearm malfunctions. Because again, if this had really happened and this gun misfired that many times and you're like bragging about what you did and proud of what you did, you absolutely would include the misfires. It just would make for a juicier story, right? Yang stating the pistol was disposed of in a bucket of cement mirrors the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force presenting Andrew Yang with a bucket of cement during a prior interrogation where they stated they knew his mother had put the gun inside. Yang stated that Ryder bumped into a counter across the kitchen, but the most likely countertop had an undisturbed glass of liquid. I believe there was more than one glass too, and that's never questioned. But there were two glasses there, um, and other objects on it with no sign of blood or disturbance. Yang's statement that the kitchen was dark and the floor in shadows does not reflect the actual conditions at the time of the event. On October 4, 2007, the sun rose at 6:52 a.m. as evidenced by the images that they have here. And so you can see the sun in these pictures. Go to freemarniyang.com and look at them. So you can see from these pictures from that time, the sun was shining at that time in the morning. So the building entry hallway and the Ryder kitchen window both had south-facing glass. The lattice window covering in the kitchen may restrict sunlight, but not enough to throw the room into darkness sufficient to restrict vision. The sunglasses Yang purportedly wore may restrict light transmission, but the eyes also adapt to varying lighting conditions, such as when entering a darker environment from outside. Any difficulty in seeing only lasts seconds. There is no permanent vision restriction while wearing sunglasses. Yang states that she slammed the door when leaving, but the initial responding police were easily able to access the Ryder condominium and find their victim. That would suggest that the door was ajar. Yang states that she fired one last shot into Ryder's head while she was on the floor, but Ryder's head wound was to the back of the left side of her head, which was turned down to the floor and inaccessible. The exit for wound A was through the chin, was adjacent to Ryder's right shoulder on the floor. The wound A bullet was inside the plastic garbage can in the opposite direction of the wound A trajectory. Wound A was instantly fatal So Ryder could not have moved on her own accord afterwards, i.e., turn her head away after the shot. None of the physical evidence supports Ryder being on the floor until after the infliction of the fatal shot A to Ryder's head. Yang's statements that Ryder's legs extended into the hall is not physically possible. If Ryder's legs were outside of the door, the remainder of her body would have been substantively closer to the door and would have to be dragged into the position found. The earlier outline of the shooting reconstruction shows that neither Ryder nor the assailant made significant moves within the kitchen. The fact that Yang said she only took 1 or 2 steps inside when taken in context to the entire statement fails to prove any involvement in this incident. Every other of Yang's statements has been substantively rebutted based on the physical evidence from the scene. The Lake County Major Crimes Task Force failed to make a comprehensive study of the scene evidence into account as a preventative measure for a false confession. Instead, the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force persisted in the belief that they would solve this through sheer investigative will. Their inane actions during various interviews and interrogations demonstrated a blind bias and predisposition in the guilt of their preferred suspect over an independent search for the truth. We have been involved in this matter for over 4 years. During that time, we have worked on a dozen or more significant matters, such that our investigation of this matter has not been worked on full time. In contrast, the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force personnel certainly began with significant staffing resources and individuals who were assigned to do nothing else but work this case. We only gained access to some scene film photographs in October 2018. We only became aware of the evidence suggesting the bullet impact under the cabinets in early 2021. To date, we have never had access to the actual incident scene. In contrast, the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force had access to the Ryder home for at least 2 days, conducted scene examinations, bullet trajectory analysis, and still failed to detect the east wall bullet impact site. They failed to measure or document the kitchen and dining room walls and floor and other evidence items. They appear to have failed to detect the bullet impact in the garbage can until after they moved it out of the kitchen. Tampering with evidence. We have created an actual size kitchen floor mock-up by use of a plastic tarp and painter's tape. The floor contains representations and locations, and I want to do this now too, of all the pictured evidence items, Ryder's approximated body position, and the kitchen door swing. Recently, we added an additional tarp to represent the hallway outside the kitchen. This addition includes the solid wall on the south and the closed front door for Ryder's residence. This addition highlights the restricted movement within the space and has potentially highlighted a previously not considered factor. To this time, the presumption has been that the assailant was right-handed and is most of the general population. Testing of the various hypotheses and positions in developing this shooting sequence in this deadly assault appeared to favor a left-handed offender. While we cannot state this as definitive fact, there is strong enough evidence that the possibility cannot be ruled out and must be presented as part of our findings. Interesting. So when Marni drew me her hand, she drew her left hand. Why? Because then that would make her right-handed to trace her hand with. Despite the fact Yang made over here statements, she has steadfastly denied any involvement in this matter. The statements that she made about the crime do not match the facts or evidence. The police and prosecution have failed to exercise any due diligence to evaluate the veracity of statements and stop the waste of government resources by a false confession. Their eagerness to clear a high-profile case overcame commonly accepted procedures in their zeal for an arrest and conviction instead of a search for the truth. And then signed Arthur Borchers. Next thing is the affidavit of Dr. Cyril Wecht. So he reviewed the documents that he prepared. They are true and accurate to a matter of medical certainty. It is my opinion that Marni Yang did not fire the fatal shots that killed Ronnie Ryder. Dr. Cyril Wecht, CYRILWECHT. You can go to freemarniyang.com and go to the experts to read about Cyril Wecht. We've got a video on there too of him talking about this case. We've got his background on there, but you can just Google him and see all the famous cases he's been involved in. Nicole Brown Simpson, John Benet Ramsey, JFK. This is an expert who, not from here, Sean Gale's not a god to him. Maybe doesn't even know who Sean Gale is. Maybe doesn't even care. He's just looking at the evidence, the science, and the facts. To a matter of medical certainty, it is my opinion that Marni Yang did not fire the fatal shot that killed Ronnie Ryder. Is this the last thing? Yes, this is the last thing. We've only got a page and a half left. Affidavit of Stephen Wade. I was at Leroy's barber shop at blah, blah, blah in Chicago on October 4, 2007. I saw Sean Gale enter the barber shop at approximately 10:30 a.m. Gale was noticeably upset and stated to Leroy, "I did it. She's gone." Both Gale and Leroy went into the back room, which was also Leroy's office with a one-way mirror. There was a loud discussion between Leroy and Gale. When Leroy and Gale returned to the shop area, Gale's face was red. He appeared to be very stressed and worried, and he didn't sit still in the chair. He kept shifting his position in the chair. I remember this vividly because I was concerned Leroy would cut him while shaving his head since Gale was moving so much. When Gale left the barber shop, Leroy told me and several of the barbers to leave the shop and don't come back for the day that the police would be coming soon. I was never questioned by the police. Leroy never allowed us to speak about this in the barber shop. He told us what the celebrities say and do in the shop stays in the shop, because this barber shop is the place that all the Black athletes and famous people would go to this barber shop. And if you don't know the in the Black culture, barbershops are a big deal. I mean, look at the movies Barbershop. So it, and you're there a lot, guys obviously too, when getting, and I know too from my shaved head, how, if I want my head to be this closely shaved, I have to do it once a week. So if you're not, and I do it myself, but if you're getting it professionally done like a celebrity would, so you're going to a barber shop very often. It becomes family and friends and such. And Leroy's is just known as a place of, this is where you go. So being told, first rule of Fight Club, first rule of Leroy's barbershop is don't talk about Leroy's. So here it says there was an unwritten shop policy to cater to the celebrities that came to the shop, or we would lose our barber station. I've never spoke about this to anyone. Sean Gale had never come to the barber shop in the morning before. Because, see, you're a creature of habit and a routine. So your standard thing is, I'm going to the barbershop at such and such a time. But on the day that his pregnant girlfriend is shot, he goes to the barbershop at the time the crime is occurring. So Sean Gale had never come to the barbershop in the morning before. He always comes in the afternoon. Gale is an afternoon client. No one has given me or offered me anything of any value or money in exchange for my statement. No one has threatened or coerced me into providing this statement. And that's the final thing of it. So I again say to you, if you're watching this live or you watch it, since now we're almost done here after 2 hours and 38 minutes so far. So when you're watching this replay, Tell me why you think Marnie Yang would be guilty when you see all of that. And that's not even all there is. There's more. This is just from the latest filing. You know it from all the other cases, how every time when you try to get it back in court, you have to give something new. So, Marnie, like all these other wrongful convictions, absolutely, they should just open the doors and let her out. She's been there 14 years now, 14, 15 years that she's been incarcerated for something she's innocent of. So, that's what should happen. But at the very least, the evidence should be heard in court. It's all there. And just like every other one, you got to go back to the same judge that's already ruled against you and try and get that person to let you in. Marnie has another court date scheduled for March 20th. I think, we were just in court last week. Not really, it was really quick, just giving a date. Um, so it's still that fight of trying to get the judicial system to do right by the evidence and by the victim or victims, Ronnie's unborn daughter, Skylar. Marnie is just somebody who was one of Sean Gale's group of women that he was having relations with. Marnie had been with Sean Gale for years, and so was Ronnie. A lot of the women Sean Gale was with, he was with for long periods of time. And for whatever reasons, these girls all knew about other girls. I mean, that's a whole nother thing that somebody sent a letter out. They knew there were others. Ronnie's just the only one that really thought she could really make a real relationship with Sean. But she had gotten pregnant by him multiple times before this one, and he made her have abortions. So Ronnie hid this pregnancy from him. So because she's getting older and she wanted a child. Um, and he was not happy, did not want children. And also, don't you think it's a little suspect that after this all goes down, he leaves the country? He lives in the UK somewhere now? When told you here in the Chicagoland area, they are worshipped. And I know he comes back from time to time for whatever. And oh my gosh, I'm seeing stuff again about, the Super Bowl Bears, and even played something with their video, the Super Bowl Shuffle, and all that, So he willingly left here. He fled. Why? So mm, the evidence, and also just when you hear it, what makes more sense? Sean Gale did not want to be tied down to one particular woman, and he did not want a child. That's what makes the most sense. Not Marnie, who was one of a stable of women and had been for years. Marnie had other boyfriends too. She was living her life. Marnie's working multiple jobs, taking care, raising her kids. She was getting no help from her ex-husband. Um, and she had a business relationship with Sean Gale, and sometimes would have sex. She's a single woman. He's a single man. They can do that. She's not going to kill some girl that's been with Sean the whole time she's been with Sean. It's she doesn't care. She's got her own life and her own things going on, and no thoughts of Sean Gale gonna be the one for her. But he's the one that it's known that didn't want children and had 17 freaking girlfriends that he isn't even taken care of. There was nothing in it for any of these women to be with him. He wasn't paying for Ronnie Ryder's home. You know, um, if any of these girls would like go on, if Sean would even take them on a vacation, they had to pay their own way. So he wasn't like a sugar daddy. It's just, I I personally think I don't know what he looks like now, but back during that time, I thought he was very attractive. So he's a good looking guy, Super Bowl Bears, so it's like, ooh, so I think girls just, fell into that. Um, but for Marnie, there's no jealousy of another woman. She knows this is a guy that we have real estate dealings together. And sometimes they have sex. She also had sex with other boyfriends. There's so much evidence that shows that Sean Gale wanted Ronnie gone. It's got to happen before the baby is born. And then the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force, because Lake County, I mean, the Bears have a practice in Lake County. So it's like super cool to um get to go to Bears functions and stuff, being Lake County law enforcement. So it's more when you see Sean Gale, it'd be like, can I have your autograph, man? Can I get a picture? He was never seriously considered. And you all know that's the first person you have to clear, really clear. So the evidence supports, and the most likely scenario is Sean Gale had this done. And if nothing else, that trajectory, that is my big huge thing. And when I went to that meeting and they had the figure with the pull and the trajectory, and I know because I've hugged Marnie, I know how itty bitty she is. And I'm not even as tall as Ronnie Ryder was. It's not possible. And her hands are so itty bitty with the gun and it misfiring and having to clear it in 15 seconds. Also, but there's evidence she was home at this time too, and her son was there. So she can't be there when she was at home and her son was home sick from school. So it's known that she was even home when there's so much. So this filing is just a little bit of it. And I always tell you that with Kathleen Zellner too, going, what we get from Kathleen Zellner, you always got to hold some back. Because if this gets shot down, you have to have new evidence to go again. So I know there's a lot more. So anything you come to me with saying, well, I think she's guilty because of this, I can show you where in science it's wrong. She's absolutely innocent, and there's no way she could have committed this crime. There's no motive. They're made up motives, not a real thing. She was at home. There's evidence she was at home. There's evidence that she said she was going to make shit up. There's evidence she saw the wire. It's not her making it up, trying to sound cool or whatever. Oh, yeah, I saw it. So I said this. You hear Christy Passion because she goes to the bathroom at the Denny's when she first walks in and she says, I can't remember. It's been a while since I've listened to it. Where she's like, we have a problem, folks. I don't know if we're going to be able to use this. A wire fell, and I think she saw it. I mean, so it's known that Marty saw it. So saying to her mom and her dad in separate phone calls, I'm going to make shit up. They're harassing her son. Her son goes to, commits himself, because he's having a mental breakdown from them showing up at his school and putting him in a lineup and all this stuff to just, tighten it, tighten it, tighten it on the Yang family. I don't know why they focused on Marnie out of all the 17 girls he was dating. I know there was the one woman that they kind of looked at, the one that Sean Gale had a restraining order against, but it's still for whatever reason, they focused then on Marnie as being the one. So they chose the single mother of 3 children to be the one that they're going to go after, and go after her 16-year-old. Emily, so when they come crashing into the home, um, so again, 16-year-old girl who had been sleeping, so she doesn't even have a bra on. So you know how uncomfortable, I'm 51. I don't give a shit. Whatever. This is what I am. But for a 16-year-old girl, and now there's all these adults all of a sudden in your face and you don't even have a bra on. And it's like, can I, and look at how they've tortured that family. And Marnie was going to put a stop to it. So I'm going to make shit up. I was at home working on my dead car of her car wouldn't start. So she was at home. Andrew's homesick from school. Andrew's right there. So she knows there's evidence and everything that she's at home. I didn't do this. So I'm just going to say I did it so they'll stop harassing my children. Lawyers will figure it all out. Nope. She's been in prison for 14, 15 years. Her son Andrew has a daughter now that Marnie does. So Marnie's a grandma. Her kids have had to grow up basically orphans since their dad took off. Luckily they have great grandparents who have been doing what they can to help them, but they're also grandparents. They're older, you know. So Marnie has missed out on finishing raising her kids, and now she's got a granddaughter. All right, I am going to close this out. We've been on for 2 hours and 51 minutes. We'll be doing more videos on the Marni Yang case. Go to freemarniyang.com and take your deep dive into the stuff we have there. There's also the Free Marni Yang Facebook page that her dad Larry runs. So you can go through that and see everything that's on there. If there's any court movement, I will update everybody on that as well, so you can follow the Justice with Jax Facebook page too for this case and other cases. Always make sure you like and subscribe to this channel so maybe you'll get a notification of the next time I go live. I don't know offhand when's the next time I'm going live or about what. Always waiting for something to finally happen in the Melissa Kaluzinski case. And in the Stephen Avery case, we're waiting for the judge to rule, but there's no time limit on that judge. So we could be waiting years since Judge Flowers likes to play around with that. So if you've got any questions on the Marni Yang case, you can email me at justicewithjax@gmail.com. If you are a witness in the Marni Yang case that you have never come forward and you need help getting in touch with her lawyer, Jed Stone, you can reach out to me for that. Or if Google Jed Stone and you can find his information and talk to Jed and tell Jed what you know, because I know there's other people out there that know something. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm out. As usual, investigation continues.